Yeah, so thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so this is James Thompson show. So basically we're talking about the elections coming up, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Um this is a well, all elections are so to be important, but as I was talking to you, you were telling me this election should be very important to and so I just wanted to ask you, like, as a person coming from my geographical background and my race, uh, how would it be better if Joe Biden were to become the president of the United States versus Donald Trump's reelection? How would, what benefits would I look forward to receiving from that? What do I have to look forward to?
Well, I'm going to turn that around a little bit and say, I mean, not to, not, can you hear me when I take this out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I just want to hear myself better. Um, as the oath of doctors, in terms of, I'm not a doctor, but when they say do no harm, the first thing is to do no harm. I feel like Donald Trump is doing an enormous amount of harm to all of us, but particularly to Black people and people of color, because of systemic racism, whatever everybody else is experiencing. I feel like Black people and people of color are only going to experience it on a more brutal level. So just starting with, just to start with COVID, let's say. COVID is literally killing us. We literally have the highest rate, the highest number of cases, the highest death rate of any country in the world, particularly any developed country in the world. So, and as much as Donald Trump likes to say, well, it came from China and we didn't know, well, A, he did know. B, the rest of the world found out the same time we did. And their situations were not as dire as ours because they did something about it. Mm-hmm. They enacted, it's tough. It's not an easy thing to control, but they did everything they could control. I mean, South Korea was probably the first country that took the most concrete steps in terms of testing and mask wearing. And, and our country was like, oh, well, we can't provide tests, it's not the government's problem, it's a state's problem. And my personal feeling was that, remember, there were months when he didn't even address it, right? It's going to go away with the warm weather. It's just like the flu. Then there were a few weeks when he did address it. And I remember specifically when the news came out that this was affecting Black people and people of color at a far greater rate. I forget what it was, 2 or 3 times as many cases, as many deaths, worst outcomes. And I swear that is when he started treating it as, you know what, let's just open up the economy. Like, frontline workers, essential workers, they're disposable workers. Literally the people working in the hospitals. I mean, how many nurses or how many people work in hospitals are people of color? How many people who are stocking the shelves in the grocery stores or delivering food? How many of those people are people of color? People picking the food in the, in the fields, picking the produce, immigrants with zero protections of any kind, disposable. So to me, I would literally start there. There's so many other things you could say about what Donald Trump is how Donald Trump is hurting Black people and people of color, immigrants, women, LGBTQ people. You could go down the list. But if we want to start with literally a life and death issue, I think we could start there.
Okay.
And I swear his attitude changed when they came out with that news. To me, it was a very distinct moment.
Yeah. So, cause for as a black person, and then let me say, this would be, I think, my third election, I believe. So, I believe I voted for Barack twice, Hillary once, so fourth election, third or fourth. Um, and what I'm noticing is I see like a lot of adults, young adults around my age. So I guess that's from the ages, let's say, 22 to 27. We're just stopped voting, and I'm saying that becoming more common and common, and especially because us as blacks, we feel like it's the same every time. Uh, we go through hell all the years that these people are in office, and it seems like they only care about us when it's time for to be reelected, or when they need the black vote, and when they need the black vote to beat another party. And other than that, they don't care about our votes. No one wants to listen to us. Um, I really feel like that the uh, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they don't um, they don't assure black people anything until we're like sort of burning down, and then they want to offer a mild solution, a solution that's not going to last or benefit us in the long run. They sort of just give us, little, so they'll give us little money here and there, but never anything of substance that will last the Black Party generations. So what do you have to say about that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and it's, I think, I hate to hear when they talk about the black vote, like there's a black vote, like all black people are like, and they all think this way, just the way they're talking about the Latino vote. There's so much to be done. I mean, I absolutely believe that there is systemic racism in this country, in every institution. And as you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I mean, I think there seems to have been a really bit of an awakening with the murder of George Floyd. Like, I don't think all these murders of unarmed black people was any news to black people, but I think a bunch of white people may be like, oh wow, they're seeing these videos that they didn't see before. And how can anybody see all those videos and say, well, white people get killed by police too? Where are the videos? Like, if this happens across the board, first of all, it shouldn't be happening to anybody, any color, but it is not happening across the board. There are clearly way more black victims of police brutality and racial profiling and all that. And so it's the school to prison pipeline. I mean, it's the discipline of kids of color in schools. This stuff is all so well documented. I feel very passionately about these issues. I was kind of really looking into these things for this educational program I was doing on implicit bias. And the crazy thing is that like now there's so much explicit bias. I mean, it's but anyway, I'm sorry. There's so many things to talk about. Was I answering the question?
It's great. I understand this is like it's a complicated maybe even emotional subject. So, it's you're on track. So you're on track.
Okay.
So yeah.
I mean, and it's across the board. It's like it's the whole issue of underlying conditions. Like, yeah, like people of color have more underlying conditions because they have less access to pretty much everything. And so it's not like I think the Democrats have failed black people too, but there's been well, look what the GOP is doing now. Okay, I'm trying to make myself focus in here on the moment. This election, the amount of voter suppression, that's a GOP thing. That's a hallmark of the Republican Party. Democrats fought harder for voting rights, and the GOP is literally undoing voting rights. When I forget the name of that case, I should know it by now, but where they just said, oh, okay, these states that used to have to report before they do any changes to their voting laws, they have to get it approved by, I forget, the Justice Department or whatever. And they said, oh, well, we don't have that problem anymore, so we don't need those protections anymore. And, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, that's like telling somebody, oh, you don't need your umbrella, what is it? I forget what it is. You have your umbrella. You're so dry in a rainstorm because of your umbrella, but you can put your umbrella down now because you're dry. You're dry because of the umbrella. Like those protections were making voting more accessible and preventing the kind of voter suppression that is now rampant. And as soon as the Supreme Court, which is a disaster, as soon as they let those protections go, I forget how many states, a couple of dozen states, right away put in all these voting restrictions, whether it's about removing poll locations or requiring ID or, this whole thing with the rights of felons to vote, former felons to vote. People have done their time, paid their debt. Like in Florida, they passed legislation saying, okay, you paid your debt to society, you can now vote. The Republican majority went back and said, oh no, not before you pay all these fines and all your court fees. And so it's like, okay, we're going back to poll taxes. And this is all GOP stuff. And this is all Trump supporters. I mean, I'd like to think, people say, well, I don't vote for the party, I vote for the person. But at this point, the party is not questioning any of his really horrible leadership. I mean, from the beginning, as I say, when he first came down the elevator, what's his pitch? Immigrants, Mexicans are rapists and murderers. His dog whistles to white supremacist groups. So anyway, so that's to me, there's a big difference between Trump and Biden. Like Biden is not.
I can understand like
wonderful, perfect, but Trump is more dangerous.
Yeah. See, and that's my point. And so it's like you guys want black people to vote for Trump. I mean, for Biden because you say Trump is more dangerous. But when you look at the history of the United States, I don't think that there has ever been a president who wasn't dangerous to black people. And I think that's why we're so skeptical about voting for either president. And I think that's why it seems like every election we're voting, black people, especially black youth, are voting less and less. And it seems like the black people from the older generation, they're strictly going to vote Democrat. And the black vote is just so split. So, for the small audience that I have, and you could convince, I guess, you could get an extra 10 votes. Because I actually, I was talking to my friends or whatever about this interview, and they were like, they were asking me, they were like, what are you going to talk to her about? And I was like, the same things I was talking to you guys about.
What does she know?
Yeah, and I was like, why should we? Because they're still undecided. Well, they're just plainly not going to vote at all. They're planning not to vote. So, they're going to. They're going to
put them on here. Let me talk to them.
I wish I actually tried to get us all on the same line. But everybody's pretty busy. But they're definitely going to see this video as soon as I'm done with it. And maybe you could convince them as well because so it's going to be a very interesting topic. Especially we have to hold them to their word. If they're saying they're going to help the black people in this type of manner, then that needs to be done. And we also have to understand that. I'm a black man, so I'm concerned about what Donald Trump or Joe Biden will do for my community, as well as you are. I don't know if you're if you're part of the community of immigrants. You will be concerned about with that more so with those issues. So as a black man, it's a definite concern to me about what Joe Biden is going to do for my community, how my community will be affected, and and it's basically the type of financial means that's going to get put into my community, and that means a lot. Are there going to be more jobs that are going to come to my community, and also are there going to be more protection by the police, reasonable protection? And when I say reasonable protection, I mean there are blacks, we want to be protected by the law, we just don't want to be murdered as well. And that's sort of been a
reasonable expectation.
Yes, that's sort of been a double standard, politically, because they're saying, well, you guys, you don't want to see your neighborhood, but then you do want to see your neighborhood. It's like, yeah, we want you guys in our neighborhood to protect and serve as you ought to be. We don't want you in our neighborhood, killing us and making things worse off than us, for us. And I think that's with any community. The police officer should basically be I would say like a sign of justice, that shines. They don't necessarily have to do something all the time. Just their presence should be good enough a lot of times, and enough times it is. If criminals see a police officer just sitting right there in the corner, a lot of criminals, 90% of the time, they're not going to try anything. So it's not about necessarily police action, but the non-action and the surveillance and the presence of the police. If you have just more police just hanging around there, doing their routes around the community, stopping at the stores, saying hi to the residents community, getting familiar with the community, you'll have less issues like that. And like I said, when you have a consistent police presence, then you have a less consistent criminal presence. The more police that are driving around every 15 minutes, the less criminals that are going to be around that area. Now, when you don't have police around there a lot, the crime is going to build up. And then it's going to get to a certain point where the police can't just deter the crime by their presence. They're going to have to physically go in there and start arresting people because you're letting the crime build up. If you keep the police at a certain level and keep them rotating in a part of the community, just like a security team at the mall, they're in constant rotate. It makes it hard for the criminals to sort of do anything because the police are there every 5 minutes. So they're going to have to go into another area, versus the police just waiting and then just storming in. And it looks so much worse as a black resident. We're seeing the police kill people when all this could be avoided. So, what do you, as far as prison reform, what can you say that Joe Biden, what about his policies? What is he saying? Because I haven't heard too much about what is he saying about the police reform, or what is Joe Biden planning on doing in that area, or not even Joe Biden, but the Democratic Party around this time of this election. What are you guys planning on doing about that?
When you say you guys, I'm not really an expert on all of his proposed policies by any means, and I told you that when you asked me to speak with you. I told you I'm not an expert. I do think that the whole issue of whether you're talking about defund the police or reform the police, but obviously, George Floyd's murderer was in a department that was supposedly being reformed. So, people feel like reforming doesn't really work. I'm trying to remember, is it DeRay McKesson? Is that his name? You know who I mean?
No, I'm sorry.
Do I have that name right? DeRay McKesson? I might be. He's a young black activist. I forget if he's part of Black Lives Matter or whatever, but I heard him speak and he made so much sense in terms of retrain the police. Again, I'm not answering your question because I don't know the answer to it. I don't really know specifically what Biden has, what policies he's proposing for criminal justice reform. But I think there's enough discussion on among Democrats, and also I just want to say, I'm not like a hardcore Democrat. Okay, I supported Bernie, but that is who we've got now. So, as you know, I'm pounding the pavement for him. But I feel like with the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement, there's been more acknowledgement across the country about the need for, if you want to call it defunding the police or reforming the police, but reallocating money. I mean, so yeah, this guy, Jerome McKesson, if I have his name right, he was saying, every cop is trained as if they're a soldier, and they're armed as if they're going to war. And they have all this equipment and, arms, and some of them have tanks. It's crazy. And very few cops on any force need that kind of weaponry. I mean, there's so many things cops get called for, whether it's to get the cat out of the tree or to somebody's having a mental illness crisis or something. So you don't need a soldier armed to the teeth for every single police call. So the whole concept of police has to be changed. And I think it's just, again, I don't know what Biden's specific policy recommendations are, but I feel like this is a conversation being had much more among Democrats than Republicans. What are Republicans calling the Black Lives Matter protests? Riots, looting. I know that like half of those are like white supremacists coming in to sabotage peaceful protests. But I feel like the conversation has begun in seriousness. And, it's sad when it's the kind of thing like, oh, even white people are talking about this, so now it must be serious. But, you do hear more, in addition to Black voices, you hear more white leadership in all these different cities and towns saying, yeah, we don't need to have these kinds of police forces. And, there just needs to be reform across the board, beginning, and in a way it begins with the police, because the police are the ones, racially profiling, stopping people of color, and the rest is sadly history, Yeah. So I agree with everything you're saying. I just, as I said, I'm not an expert on Biden's policies, but Trump, what does he say? He glorifies the police, he glorifies the military, he glorifies dictators, he glorifies strongmen. He wants to see tanks in the streets. He thinks that's a sign of strength.
I could agree with that.
And of course, so, and that's exactly what we don't need. That doesn't bring more peace. So he is, look, I know we talked briefly about Obama, that Obama didn't do, I think I told you, I'd just spoken to another woman shortly before I spoke to you the other day, another Black woman who said, I'm not voting, even Obama didn't do enough for us, et cetera, et cetera. And, I know a lot of people who miss Obama, could practically be moved to tears, like when you hear him speak after hearing the current imposter in the White House speak. But I feel like there was so much he could not do because of the GOP controlled Senate, whose goal was to A, make him a one-term president, B, to thwart anything he was going to try to do. Now, I know, it's important not to glorify Obama also. I think he probably took the most heat because the drone program he kept going that was killing innocent people, and he was called deporter in chief because he deported more people than previous administrations. And I don't want to use the word but, because I don't want to justify that in any way, but it makes me think. I had this brilliant political science professor once who said, "There's nothing more dangerous in the White House than a Democrat who has to prove he's tough." So I think of that with both of those issues with Obama, like with the drone strikes. As Democrat, he's got to prove he's still tough. He still supports the military, blah blah blah. And I feel like even as a black man, he seemed to me he wanted to make very clear that he was everybody's president, and he was like maybe bending over backwards to not be the black president for the black people. And so I can understand how black people would feel like, damn, you could have done a lot more. But at the same time, you couldn't, because he wasn't king, and it was the GOP controlled Senate that was absolutely out to get him. And I think racism has everything to do with that, even more than party. And I think the whole Trump administration, as you imagine a new leader gets into power and they have a to-do list, right? He had an undo list. And I think it was literal. I think they actually had a list of everything Obama had enacted. We're going to undo it. And, the Paris peace talks and the Paris climate talks, the Iran nuclear deal, and then all these environmental things that Obama put into place to protect the water, to protect the air, to say cars had to emit, less pollution. Trump has undone them as fast as he possibly can. And even the car industry has said, no, actually, we don't want you to do that because we're already making cars and there's support for cars that are cleaner. But, sorry, what was the question? We can go so many different ways, and I can go.
Yeah.
I'm pissed off about a lot of things about the Trump administration. So, again, I think he is literally putting our lives in danger. Some people say he is the biggest national security threat. He's friends with all our enemies. He disses all our allies. He's literally killing us with this by refusing to acknowledge science and protect us. He's literally killing us. And black and brown people are the most vulnerable. He's making it easier to pollute. Shall I go on, or do you have another question?
Yeah, I think we have enough. So, I guess it'll just be one final question. What things do you what things could you are you visualizing? Because I like I said, as a black man, what I'm looking for as a result of this election is a better opportunities and a better place in the society of the United States is for black people. So my reason for voting is a little bit different from yours. So all I'm asking is as a person coming from your geographical background, like why should we as black people vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Because it seems like over the years, over the centuries, over the decades, that regardless of who black people have voted for, we always get stabbed in the back. A lot of promises are made and a lot of promises are not kept. So you could elaborate on that for a couple minutes, and then then we're done.
You know what? I thought of something that I wished I said to you the other day when we spoke. Actually, a couple of things. Because you said this was the first year you were not going to vote.
Yep.
I have a friend, she's not black, but she's Asian, and she's very politically involved, and she doesn't believe, she believes our system is so corrupt, whatever. I won't go into all her beliefs. So she's never voted. This is the year she's going to vote. So that's pretty dramatic. I mean, she's just one person, but just in terms of someone who had as many issues, if not more, with the system as you do, all the years she didn't vote, this year she's voting because it's that bad. It's that dangerous. there's that much at risk. Also wanted to mention something else. Okay, Trump was elected. So many people were pissed off, literally in tears or in either sadness or terror. And what happened in 2018? More women and people of color ran for office than ever. And they won. And why did they win?
I don't know. You tell me.
Because people voted for them.
Okay.
The squad, I had to write down all their names because I knew I wouldn't remember, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC in New York, Yellen Oman in Minnesota, Ayanna Pressley in Massachusetts, Rashida Tlaib in Michigan. They're in Congress now because they ran, because they were pissed off, and people voted for them. And, you know, there are millions, I forget the numbers, but there are millions of people who did not vote in 2016 because they thought it didn't matter. And I don't care how much anybody hates Hillary. And as I said, she wasn't my number one pick, but to me, there is no question that Trump has done so much damage. It'll take us a long time to even undo the damage he has done. And as I said, if he's doing damage to our national security with our terrible relations with our allies and cozying up to dictators instead, if he's hurting everybody and the environment, who suffers the most? Black people and people of color, because who's going to be living near the polluting power plants, and who's going to be the most vulnerable? Who's going to be, I'm not saying all Black people, of course, but the most vulnerable people will be hurt more than anybody else. And there's a lot of Black and brown people who are the most vulnerable. Okay. Even though I'm a white woman with, all the privilege that comes with that, I mentioned to you my heritages. My grandparents were Jewish East European immigrants who got out before the Holocaust, but anyone who did not get out was killed, except for one cousin who founded the ghetto, one of the founders of the Ghetto Fighters kibbutz in Israel. But everyone who did not get out was killed. And I knew about this from when I was a little kid. And I always had a strong sense about justice. And I know, that the theme from the Holocaust, from that education is never again. And I always felt strongly that never again means everybody. So I'm cool, I know I'm white, I'm privileged, but I'm not content with that. Okay. So it really matters to me how this government and this president treats Black people and people of color and immigrants. And so yeah, that's why I met you the other day, knocking on your door.
Yeah. So thank you for coming in. So like I said, definitely. And after I vote, because I believe my mother, she knows where we're voting. As I said, it's down the street at the school. So after the vote,
I like that read. Yeah. I like that.
So after we vote, I definitely I'm gonna reach out and contact you, after the election, possibly maybe a week or two after the election, and we can have another discussion about the future and what we have to about looking forward. And hopefully Biden wins. As I said, one of my role models, Charlemagne the God, he thinks we should get Biden in there. And I believe in listening to my elders a little bit, listening to their feedback. So if he wants Biden, Biden can't be all that bad. Even he has done some stuff.
Yeah, don't just take my word for it.
Yeah, he has done some stuff. obviously that stuff has to be addressed, and there's a lot more to the conversation than that. But for now, I think this is a good conversation we had, and I thank you for joining me. You could tell my small, audience, what is your name, please?
My name is Susan. My whole name is Susan Goodman Jackson. In fact, what the heck, I'll tell you, I have this website, www.standup-speakout.com, and you'll see that I've been a professional musician most of my life, but I wound up really using my music to try to teach and educate myself really more about all these issues. So I want to thank you so much, first of all, for the conversation the other day. That was by far the best conversation I had with anybody in person or over the phone all this time trying to get the vote out. And thank you so much for inviting me to join you here. And I so look forward to celebrating with you.
Yeah. So, and I'll definitely contact you, I guess, on election night when we see who wins. I'll definitely contact you then to see if you guys can hold up your end of the bargain. But until then, it's been a pleasure having a conversation with you. This is the James Thompson Show. Make sure you stay corona free. You stay safe. Make sure you sanitize. Be safe. And I look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you, James.
Yep. Have a nice night. Goodbye.
Good night.